What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be taking a deep look at the recoil attachments in Battlefield 6 to see just how much of an impact any of the recoil improving attachments have on our guns, because the descriptions for these are extremely vague, where they'll basically just say like this slightly reduces your recoil, or moderately, or greatly, or significantly, and that really doesn't tell us a whole lot about exactly what's going on here. So we're going to be comparing all of the recoil improving attachments to see what they do exactly. And then toward the end, I will be sharing what appears to be the best combination based on all of the testing that I've done so far. And diving right in, the first thing I wanted to point out here is today we are only looking at recoil, not spread or bloom or dispersion, whatever you want to call it. And just a quick explanation of the differences here. When firing a recoil plot, this is our rough recoil path. This is the path that our sights followed as we were firing our gun, and it kicked upwards with a little bit of a lean to the right. And obviously with this, we have our magnitude of vertical recoil as well as horizontal recoil. And that's really all we're going to be focusing on in today's video. But you might notice, of course, there are bullet holes surrounding that line, and it starts off narrow and it gets wider and wider as I continue firing. That is the spread, which is a separate mechanic that I plan on covering in a separate video, although I am anticipating we'll be seeing some changes to this soon, so I may not jump on that topic right away. But I just wanted to point out with this video, we are only focusing on recoil and trying to ignore any of the spread that's taking place, because there aren't any attachments that directly affect your spread while just standing still and firing. It's basically just attachments that improve your spread while moving, and that just goes beyond the scope of this video. So I'm going to be doing my best to isolate the recoil path itself. It's not going to be 100% flawless though, because we have that random spread mixed in, and therefore I just have to kind of eyeball things to the best of my ability. And also another limitation I want to point out right up front here is I'm only looking at one gun, and that's quite simply because I only have one gun maxed out yet where I have access to all of the attachments, and that is with the M4A1. Next, another really important thing to know about recoil is the amount of recoil you experience will depend on the input that you're using. If you're using a controller, it appears you get a 25% reduction to your vertical and horizontal recoil just by default compared to a mouse and keyboard user. And that's just one of the factors they use to try to balance the inputs out, because it is generally a lot easier to control recoil with a mouse and keyboard compared to a controller, due to that much larger range of motion that they have. And it is worth mentioning this isn't new to Battlefield. We had recoil reductions with controller in both 2042 as well as Battlefield 5. But I just want to point out, since controller is my preferred input, all of the testing from here on out will be with controller, so scale things up in your mind by 25% if you want for mouse and keyboard, but all of this testing is done on controller. And with all of that out of the way, now let's start getting into the recoil attachments, and let's start it off in the muzzle category. And we're going to look at the muzzle brakes and converter first. As you can see here, there are some slight differences when looking at each of these recoil plots compared to the base on the far left. And some of these differences may not seem obvious, so I actually did some like pixel measurements here compared to the base to get a very rough estimation of what each of these do. Again, keep in mind, this doesn't account for spread, and spread could change these numbers a little bit. I did try to eliminate any sort of outliers that looked like they were sort of a flyer shot, because those were just likely due to the spread, not the recoil path itself. And from what I can tell, these muzzle brakes appear to be primarily focused on horizontal recoil reduction, outside of the compensated brake. So we can see with both the single and double port brakes, both of them appear to help our horizontal recoil by about 30%. It's actually quite notable. It straightens up that recoil path a lot, so it doesn't drift to the right nearly as much. With the compensated brake though, as far as I can tell, this is helping both our vertical and horizontal recoil by about 20% in both cases, and therefore it does make sense that this is the most valuable out of all of these at 20 points, at least on the M4. And then finally, with the converter, this one gives us the best horizontal recoil control. It appears to give a roughly 35 to 40% reduction to our horizontal recoil, with no improvement whatsoever to our vertical recoil. So it really straightens that path out, and most of the horizontal deviation you're seeing there is just due to spread. So many will like that, because horizontal recoil tends to be more difficult to control than vertical recoil. Next, let's get into the suppressors that impact our recoil, and only two of them actually have an impact on this. These are the long suppressor as well as the lightened suppressor. And as far as I can tell, they give us the same recoil benefits. They both appear to be reducing our vertical and horizontal recoil by about 15 to 20%. And if you're curious about how the suppressors interact with the minimap, it may be a bit surprising to some of you. You will still show up on enemy minimaps when firing with suppressor in some cases. I will have a link to a video I just recently did covering all of the minimap and spotting interactions with various attachments. In either case, those are the muzzle attachments. Generally speaking, if you're looking for horizontal recoil control, this is where you want to go, although some of them help with both vertical and horizontal. Now let's get into the other primary attachment category that impacts our recoil, and this is our underbarrel category. And the first set of underbarrels here are our vertical underbarrel grips. And here are the recoil plots side by side with all of these. And if you eliminate any of those outlier flyer shots, you can see all of these are improving our recoil at least somewhat. And this is where they give the really vague description of slightly, moderately, significantly, or greatly reducing recoil. So here are the numbers that I was able to calculate. Again, these are rough numbers, but they'll get you in the ballpark at least. When it comes to slightly, this appears to be a 10 to 15% reduction to vertical and horizontal recoil. It does appear for all of these, it is a balanced reduction to our recoil, both vertically and horizontally. For moderately, this appears to be a 15 to 20% reduction. Significantly appears to be somewhere around 20 to 25%. And finally, greatly, with the classic vertical grip, gives us a roughly 25 to 30% reduction to our recoil. So that is going to give us the biggest reduction out of all of these. Then the next set of underbarrel grips we have are the stubby underbarrels. And from what I can tell, we actually get the same reductions as the vertical. They just have an impact on different stats outside of recoil compared to the vertical underbarrels. And that's why they tend to cost more. After that, we have our angled underbarrel grips. And there's only 3 of them here. We have the adjustable, the slim, and the full angled. And the first 2 slightly reduce our recoil. And again, I measured a roughly 10 to 15% reduction. Whereas with the full angled, we get moderate reduction, which is roughly 15 to 20%. After that, we have bipods, and they all say that they improve your recoil. However, in the case of the standard bipod, that doesn't appear to change our recoil unless we're mounted at all, which we'll look at mounting in just a little bit. Whereas with all of the grip pods, they do slightly improve our recoil, but this looks like a roughly 10 to 15% improvement, nothing too major there. The key with these is you are able to mount on the ground, and also it makes it easier to mount on surfaces, and when doing this, while prone, you can see a massive recoil reduction compared to just firing while prone without mounting these. So that's really where the power of the bipods come in. Don't really use them with the expectation that they're just generally helping your recoil unless you're mounted. And there we go. That finally covers it for all of the recoil attachments. Now let's talk about combinations here, because we can combine a muzzle with an underbarrel, of course. So what's the best combination going to be? Before we do that, something I don't do enough on this channel outside of my little outro is encouraging you to subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. If you guys found value with this content and you want to see more like it in the future, please hit that subscribe button and don't forget to turn notifications on so you don't miss any of my uploads. Now back to the best combinations for recoil. Well, when it comes to the underbarrels, it's a pretty clear choice. It's either the classic vertical or the low profile stubby. Both of these seem to give you the same improvement to your recoil, at least roughly the same. So that's going to be our underbarrel no matter what. And the first combination I wanted to try with that is the Convertor, since this one helps a lot with our horizontal recoil. And at least on the M4, this is looking pretty good, especially with a lot of those initial shots fired before that spread really starts kicking in. We've got a really nice tight vertical recoil path to follow, which is super easy to control. However, another combination is using that vertical underbarrel combined with the compensated brake, because this one gives us that adjustment to vertical and horizontal recoil. And as we can see here, this has the minimum amount of vertical climb to our recoil. It does tend to drift a little bit more horizontally compared to the Convertor combination here, but this is still an excellent recoil pattern. And I would say it's really up to you as well as up to the gun. If a gun has a lot of horizontal recoil, I'd probably go with the combination that includes the Convertor on the muzzle rather than the compensated brake. Whereas if a gun doesn't have much in the way of horizontal recoil by default, then go with that combination with the compensated brake. Now, obviously, there are still other factors like spread to consider. For some of you, you may want to sacrifice in the recoil department a bit, because with that classic vertical grip, for instance, this actually increases the amount of spread we experience while also moving. So if you are planning on moving and shooting, this may not be in your best interest, because spread may get in the way more than recoil will for you. Now, again, that's something I plan on covering in the not too distant future, so we'll see how various attachments impact our spread, especially while moving, as well as other methods you can use to mitigate that spread. And with that, this is where I'm curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. How are you feeling about the current state of recoil versus spread in the game? And what are your thoughts on how much these attachments are improving our recoil? Do you guys think these are doing enough for you? Maybe a little bit too much? Just let me know all of those thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.